It would be my honor. I would like to also start my remarks by saying some very important thank yous before we take the final vote on this incredibly important piece of legislation and a body of work that truly does reflect our next step in moving forward. I'd like to thank all of the council members who volunteered so much of their time to show up in my very, very special committee hearings. They just happened all the time, so they became special committee hearings instead of just regular ones. I'd like to thank Mayor Ed Murray for his work on getting the legislation primed and ready for City Council to consider. I'd also like to thank his legal counsel, Ian Warner, who also played a significant role in making sure that we received a package of police reform legislation that was ready for us to work on. Of course, our City Attorney Pete Holmes, Assistant City Attorney Andrew Meyerberg, Seattle Police Chief Kathy O'Toole, and like Councilmember Burgess, I'd also like to thank the officers of the Seattle Police Department who, in reality, we need them to be on the same page with us. We need them to recognize the importance of constitutional policing. I believe that a vast majority of them do. And I recognize that the requirements that we impose upon the police department certainly do trickle down to the men and women of the police department who we rely on to implement constitutional policing every day. And that implementation of constitutional policing, it's not just good for us. It's not just good for the residents of Seattle who don't have a gun and who don't have a badge. It's good for the public safety aspects, of course, but it's also incredibly important to keeping our officers safe as well. I'd also like to thank our OPA Director, Pierce Murphy, who also provided us with valuable technical assistance, as well as our former OPA Auditor, retired Judge Ann Lemonson, who's standing in the back, who really gave us on council and the Community Police Commission a ton of technical assistance in making sure that we understood, based on the years of her work and the volumes of reports that she has generated, that we got some of the important aspects on the back end related to discipline, appeals, and grievances right, and I think we have. And there are so many others who contributed to the process of writing and reviewing this legislation. I want to thank all of those folks. But my deepest gratitude goes to Councilmember Tim Burgess, who is the vice chair of my committee, who is the chair of our budget committee, who has really worked tirelessly alongside with me to be able to do this massive overhaul of the base ordinance that we received through his unique lens of having been a police officer for the city of Seattle at one point in time, and lending us his expertise of having chaired the Public Safety Committee, I think at least once, maybe twice. And so I really do appreciate all of the work that you have done to assist us in getting this bill in the right place. And let me tell you, if senioritis is a concept, which I think it is, it certainly does not apply to you, because you, even though this is your last year, this is quite a legacy that you are leaving behind for the residents of Seattle. And I want to thank you for your commitment to continuing to work diligently and very hard for the people of Seattle.
Well done.
I also want to take a moment to thank Amy Tsai from Council Central staff. Amy, you are a machine. I just don't know how you do it every day, and I am so grateful for all of your help, your sacrifices. You have 2 small children, and I know that you had to make a lot of sacrifices to help us get this across the finish line, and I will be eternally grateful to you. And my offer for a desk inside my office, it still stands. You're welcome anytime. Brianna Thomas, of course, from my office, who came to this body of work as a community organizer. And when I told her she was going to take over public safety and police reform, she made a very particular face. And if you know Brianna, you know which face I'm talking about. But you have really risen to the challenge. And I have been impressed by your intellect, your commitment to listen, and your ability to bring together very divergent beliefs to get us all to a place where we can feel very good about the legislation that we're about to pass. Of course, I would be remiss if I did not recognize the Community Police Commission, and I know so many of you are in the room, so I'm going to ask that if you are on the CPC or wherever on the CPC, including staff, if you would be willing to stand on your feet so that we can recognize you. I know that our work is not done. This is, like I've said before, just a step in the right direction, but I just deeply appreciate all of the work that we've been able to do together with the CPC, including, going to New Orleans and dancing in the streets while also learning about police accountability. But also having those serious conversations and literally locking ourselves in a room for 2 Saturdays in a row where we spent a total of 15 hours together to really try to figure out how to make this a big win for community and a big win for the entirety of the city. So I want to thank you for that. There were also, you might have heard in testimony, dozens of original members of the 35 organizations, which is growing, who worked with the ACLU of Washington to advocate that the Department of Justice come to Seattle and help us do what has always seemed within reach but yet unachievable. And I know a lot of you are in the room today, and so I would ask those of you who were part of the original group 6 years ago to stand and be recognized for the fact that you did all this work. And I hope Reverend Weldon doesn't punish me later for making her stand up a third time. No. But I'm going to ask that you stand, because so much of the work that we have been doing in our community was really started by you and by so many of the other women moms that you organized within our community to be brave and courageous and to stand on the right side of justice and on the right side of history. And in a lot of ways, I feel like today is a culmination of so much of the advocacy work that you have been doing for free. And I know it sometimes can feel like it's ungrateful work, like nobody is going to recognize the work that you're doing. But I want you to know and believe that I see you, that we see you, and that we so deeply appreciate all of the years, decades of service that you have provided to our community. So thank you, Reverend Weldon. It is because of the deep and steadfast commitment of so many in this community that brings us to this truly historic moment. In so many instances, the fight for 15, secure scheduling, paid sick and safe time, monumental investments in human services, transportation, and early education, Seattle continues to show time and time again that we lead. This ordinance is no exception. It is a model of what other communities across the country can expect to see as a result of Department of Justice consent decree processes that are fueled by community support. In Seattle, that community call to action and the DOJ's acceptance of that call is now paving the way to sustainable, long-term police reform without compromising officer or public safety. I truly believe that this will be an accountability system that will have legitimacy amongst our officers and police reform advocates. That is quite the achievement. But our work is not done. Although this is a significant step forward in our efforts to reform the police department and our accountability systems, this is but one additional step. Over the coming months and years, we will need to see these reforms over the finish line. Many of you know that I approach this work through a unique lens. As a civil rights attorney, I focused my practice on representing people who were subjected to excessive force and bias policing. And yes, I've even sued the Seattle Police Department. That work gave me firsthand knowledge of the OPA complaint and investigation process, and I put that knowledge to work as we struggled with this legislation. Indeed, it is this very issue that motivated my initial desire to want to serve the people of Seattle as a council member citywide. Over the past 16 weeks, I have proudly led the city's work to ensure that this legislation adequately reflects the significant work previously done by the Community Police Commission to assess, analyze, and incorporate the needs of community members most adversely affected by policing. That process has included 7 committee hearings, 2 evening public hearings, over 50 meetings with CPC leadership and staff, multiple meetings with my colleagues, the mayor and the mayor's office, and a trip and 3 trips across the country from Los Angeles to New York City to New Orleans to learn about best practices and standards. All of this has informed the work of my committee, and the results show in today's legislation, which has wide consensus within community and beyond. This legislation will set us on the path to changing the culture at SPD, enhancing public trust in our officers, and always turning a mirror on ourselves to continuously improve rather than waiting for a crisis to reform. That has been my vision all along. This bill represents our collective vision of sweeping reforms designed to advance constitutional policing, which is good for community and good for public safety and good for the safety of officers. Thank you to all of my colleagues for indulging special committee hearing after special committee hearing, and I am deeply grateful to all of you in the audience today who weren't in those rooms, but I know you were pushing. I want to thank all of you for advocating for community-driven police accountability and reform. Today would not be possible without you, so thank you.